Hello and welcome to Face to Face, our current affairs program where we explore the world's most pressing issues from a Central Eastern European perspective. I'm Anna Kalczyńska and I'm joined by Adam Jasser, Deputy Director for News at TVP World. Good evening, Adam.
Good evening.
Unsurprisingly enough, Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico paid a visit to Moscow, officially to secure Russian gas supplies in light of the halted transit through Ukraine as of January 1st. But Putin and Fico, as we learn, have discussed also military issues and the prospects of ending the war in Ukraine. So my question to you, Adam, is about European approach to Fico, because on numerous occasions we heard that Slovakia has no other option as far as looking for energy than Russia. So isn't somehow negligence on the part of EU to fail to create one single mandatory common energy policy to do without the Russian suppliers?
No, I think it's the other way around. I think it's Slovakia's choice to bet the house on Russian supplies. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Europe took a course to divorce the region from Russian dependence on gas and other supplies. And a lot of countries have done their homework, even at huge pain to themselves, to actually get rid of Russian supplies and replace them with supplies from elsewhere. It's costly, but it's principled. Slovakia, Hungary, and to a certain extent also Austria chose a different path, believing that sooner or later this war is going to be over and that therefore business as usual with Russia will resume. And Mr. Fico said it directly that Slovakia hopes to restore proper economic relationship with Russia. So in a sense, Mr. Fico is now a victim of his own policy.
Although some other countries in the European Union would follow gladly if such relations could be restored, right?
We don't know that for sure.
We don't know that for sure?
I think the lesson of Russia over the past 15 years is that making yourself dependent on Russian deliveries of gas and oil creates huge security risks and dependency risks. And I think most countries in Europe have digested this lesson. Slovakia and Hungary chose a different path, and now they're frantically trying to secure deliveries from that direction, as if they didn't know that Ukraine is not really interested in the income from transit, because Ukraine doesn't make money on this transit apart from some minuscule, effectively. From an economic point of view, the fees that they are getting for this transit, they're negligible. They don't matter really that much. And President Zelensky of Ukraine, he's making a valid argument. He's saying, you know, you're paying billions for that gas, and Putin is using those billions to fund his war machine, and our people get killed. So he's not interested in continuing this.
Neither Fico nor Orbán are not deterred by sanctions imposed by EU. They're not going to follow suit with European partners, and they are still stubbornly sticking to their line of policy.
I think, you know, this is speculation, but, you know, I think they just bet on different outcomes. They believe it's a struggle between Russia and the West. They think their countries are in such a precarious position in Europe that they cannot afford to alienate Russia. They take Europe for granted, so they don't expect any serious backlash from Europe. So they're playing both sides, but we're seeing now that this game also has certain limits. And of course, both leaders are looking to Washington and the new incoming US administration in the hope that Donald Trump is going to deliver on his promise to bring peace to the conflict quickly, and that therefore business as usual can resume with Russia. But again, it's a risky scenario if you don't have common understanding with other European nations on this.
But the policy of Donald Trump still remains to be seen. And
exactly.
Lately,
so they're taking a huge gamble there.
Exactly. Donald Trump said lately that the conflict in Ukraine is more difficult to resolve than he previously had thought. But meanwhile, Vladimir Putin may decorate his wall with a third photo alongside the EU leaders since the war in Ukraine have started. Previously, Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer traveled to Russia and this July, we saw Viktor Orbán traveling to see Vladimir Putin. So I imagine the Kremlin turns such visits to their advantage, showing Putin as a partner rather than an isolated warmonger.
Frankly, I wouldn't overestimate the significance of this. I think all three leaders, as we just discussed, they're undependent on Russian gas deliveries. So, you know, they may pose as peace envoys or, Orbán even claims that he represents Donald Trump in these conversations with Mr. Putin. Well, he certainly does represent the European Union, which made it amply clear that Orbán is going solo there. Zelensky is not treating any of these two gentlemen as honest brokers, because if you want to be, if you want to play a role in a peace process, you need to be seen as an honest broker by both sides. Ukraine certainly doesn't perceive Mr. Orbán and Mr. Fico as honest brokers. So when the peace negotiations start in earnest, they are not going to be conducted by Mr. Orbán or Mr. Fico. That's at least how I see it.
Rather, we should ask perhaps how Orbán and Fico could be stopped, since they're always vetoing the decisions made by the European Council.
Yes, and I think
Russia
impatience, yes. And I think, impatience is growing. And that's why we hear more and more about these coalitions of the willing. You remember we discussed that. You said it yourself.
Yes.
And we see different formats. People will be agreeing different decisions, and they will be taking specific actions, not waiting for the entire EU machinery to follow. And I think if you look at the state of the Slovak economy and of the Hungarian economy, so far, all this grandstanding by Orbán and Fico does not change much in the quality of life there, in the economic growth, in how people live. So Fico delivered lots of promises at the beginning, in January, at the beginning of this year, offering simple solutions to complex problems. And now he's resorted to going to Moscow, which in a sense is interesting that he's going to Moscow about the fact that Ukraine is stopping gas transit. He should be much more sophisticated in his negotiations with Ukraine if he wanted this. But in a sense, he annoyed the Ukrainians so much that what is he counting on?
A different route, probably, to get the Russian gas from somewhere else.
Yeah, but then it's going to be much more costly to the Slovak Republic. It's not so easy to organize and so on and so forth. So in a sense, sometimes leaders become hostages of their own decisions and their rhetoric.
Speaking of Viktor Orbán, who doesn't exactly hide his animosity towards the government in Warsaw, he even speaks of Poland, Warsaw, having a conflict and treating Hungary as enemy. So, as we know, Viktor Orbán granted asylum to a suspect who fled the Polish justice system after being indicted on 11 charges. Now, experts say this case is a proof of a deep mistrust between two member states, considered safe, so no asylum should be granted between them, right? So what is Orbán's goal in this respective case?
I think he's communicating to the Polish opposition, so Law and Justice Party, with whom he was in a close alliance when it came to a lot of issues. You remember that back in 2015 or 16, Mr. Orbán and Mr. Kalczyński, leader of the previously governing Law and Justice Party, they promised Europe a cultural revolution. So they were basically arguing that the EU is badly run, that it needs a completely different approach, and they were saying that Poland and Hungary together will bring that major change in Europe. And I think Mr. Orbán is still living that dream, and to a certain extent Mr. Kalczyński is also living that dream. And of course the war in Ukraine changed the dynamic a little bit, because Poland under Mr. Kalczyński supported Ukraine, and the two countries drove apart. But now Mr. Kalczyński is in opposition, so he's not responsible for policy anymore, for Poland's policy. So he can go back to this relationship with Mr. Orbán. We'll see whether this produces anything, but given that charges of misuse of public funds, of abuses of power, they are beginning to metastasize, so to speak, into proceedings, and prosecutors are beginning to file charges. you cannot exclude the possibility that the Polish government in exile will be sitting in Budapest.
So this is the consequence on our domestic affairs here in Poland. But I was going to ask you also about Orbán's goal of the whole thing happening on the eve of Polish presidency. Some of the experts say that whereas this situation creates a clear case for Donald Tusk as a prime minister of Poland, and the right is here. But on the other hand, him as a president of the Council of the European Union, that somehow weakens his position, paradoxically.
But I think probably from, I cannot speak for Mr. Tusk. We'll see how he manages this. But he used rather harsh language about Hungary's attitude to Europe, to Poland, escalating. In fact, Mr. Orbán is meddling into Polish politics by granting asylum to a suspect who is a former politician. So we'll see how he manages that. If Hungary and Slovakia choose to continue this obstruction, if you will, inside the EU, as I said, I believe other countries will find ways around this. I think it's important to mention in this moment that Mr. Orbán is facing domestic problems. His party is now, Fidesz, is 20 percentage points behind the opposition figure. His popularity is low. So some of that magic of Mr. Orbán domestically is disappearing. So there's a lot of posturing on the European stage. There's this hope that Mr. Trump's inauguration and his new term is going to boost his case. Maybe, but it's just a maybe. At the end of the day, a lot depends on how the Hungarian economy does. At the moment, it's not growing, it's stagnant, and the quality of life for average Hungarians is not increasing. So he's, again, like the other leaders who offer simple solutions to complex problems, he's finding himself with a problem of delivering.
Also, the judiciary, the Hungarian judiciary, who is about to take action with the respective arrest warrant and asylum case, it's also an interesting element.
Yes, it will be, but in a sense, he is putting the Hungarian judicial system to a test, to a scrutiny, by imposing on them a decision that can, from a legal standpoint, can go only one way.
Yes.
So this asylum should not be granted.
This is interesting.
If it is granted, then he's proving the point about the Hungarian judiciary perhaps not being as free as it should.
Nevertheless, it's interesting how domestic politics and simple choices, election choices, then translate into global scene, right? Anyway, it remains to be seen. Now, if I may, I would like to move to German government, who is reeling from an attack on Christmas market in the city of Magdeburg. We were all shocked by what happened. And now the attack comes in a very heightened political tensions in Germany, with migration remaining hot-button issue ahead of a snap parliamentary election this February. So what do you think? How is it going to influence the political scene in Germany?
I'm going to evade this question by saying, forecasting is particularly difficult when it comes to the future. And even 2 months is future. We don't know. Yes, there may be a temporary spike in support for the anti-immigration parties such as AfD, but the situation gets a little bit more complicated because this assassin, or this man who perpetrated this attack, actually was a supporter of AfD.
Exactly.
So it's complex. And we at the same time see Mr. Merz, so the leader of the opposition, who is leading in opinion polls, CDU, the Christian Democrats. He's taking a tough stance on migration as well. So at the end of the day, to me, it's more of a trust issue. He wants
to introduce border controls.
Well, here you go. So, it's more a question of trust and how Germans... The fact that migration is a problem in Germany is not so much a bone of contention anymore. Now the question is, who will seem more trustworthy to tackle this issue and not going too far either? Because to many Germans, what the AfD is proposing just goes well beyond of what society at large expects. And just don't remember that even if AfD scores 20% of the vote, it's still just 20% of the vote, which means there will be a majority of, let's say, mainstream parties They may be weaker.
CDU, SPD.
SPD, the Greens. The Greens are polling at around 13%. The Social Democrats are polling at about 15%. Even if they drop, maybe the Greens gain, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's flowing towards AfD. And election results, very often, as we have seen, are unpredictable.
Unpredictable, but here comes help, Adam. As
help? To whom?
To AfD.
Right.
AfD has just received an unexpected endorsement from Elon Musk, who posted on X that AfD should be the only remedy for Germany. And he sees no differences between the Republican Party and program and AfD program, which is, to some, an absolute meddling in German internal politics, and to others, expression of liberty, right? Freedom of speech. So what do you think? What is your take on
Well, I'm very curious to see what effect that is going to have, because, you know, I'm not sure if it's not a kiss of death. You know, AfD and their voters are very suspicious of America. They're against German membership of NATO. So, and they certainly don't like US billionaires and tech companies. So is it going to be, you know, it may be confusing to AfD voters, this endorsement from Mr. Musk. And of course, he gives ammunition to AfD's opponents, the CDU and others, to say, look, you know, be careful who you choose. So here I will rest my case and wait how it plays out.
All right, but anyway, how do you judge, you know, such action by a billionaire, an entrepreneur, an owner of X platform, who simply takes an opportunity and just expresses his opinion? He's got every right to do so, but on the other hand, it's politics, and it's a serious question.
It is a serious question, because I think it's unprecedented in the world history that the man's richest person will take such a direct participation in politics. Because, of course, big business always influences politics. And in the United States, there's a very long tradition of big entrepreneurs, big banks, industrialists, media barons, influencing directly political outcomes through their media, through the power of their companies.
Let's be honest.
But what he does is unprecedented, because he takes direct, you know, he's directly involved in politics. So it's fascinating. Again, for someone who likes history, there was one precedent probably in world's history, probably more. But one I can remember is, of course, the East India Company formed by the British, which gained enormous influence and power, particularly in India and in other colonies. And they basically behaved as a state within a state. And the moment they became too powerful, the British Crown just dissolved the company the next day. So the real question is how America handles this, how America handles a rich individual who is playing politics so directly. In a sense, he's mounting a challenge to the political system that has been present in America for over 200 years.
I have just seen a picture, you know, sorry to interrupt, of Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and in between them squeezed Elon Musk, and it was not photoshopped. Yeah. So it was a true picture.
We already had some incidents where, for example, Musk got involved in a discussion about some budget measure in the US Congress, still before Trump became president. And he publicly took a position on this, saying this measure should not be adopted. And the Republicans and the Democrats in the Congress defied him and approved this measure. And I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, Donald Trump himself said, there is no risk that Elon Musk will run the government from the backseat. I'm going to be president. So you see, politicians are aware of the game Musk is playing. The question is it not too late? And how this is going to play out.
And what is the appetite of Elon Musk?
Yes, but remember, he's unelected. He hasn't run for office. And this is the argument many congressmen are using, and congresswomen.
Fair point.
So we're in uncharted territory. This is a natural experiment about political power of economic interests in the United States. And this is going to play out in the next few months.
Adam Jasser, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's all we've prepared for you today in this episode of Face to Face. Now it's time for a little announcement. Starting from January, you will be able to watch the show every Monday and Friday at 8:30, right after main news service. So once again, thank you very much. We see each other on January the 3rd, and may these coming holidays be a moment of peace to all of us. Merry Christmas, and stay tuned to TVP World.
Merry Christmas.